Okay, this is my last video for my final. Again, I just want to state that these are going on the public interweb and that these are completely my opinions. If you don't agree with my opinions, so what? I do not really care. These are my opinions. You have your own opinions. That's cool. Good for you. So yeah, I just want to say again my opinions. If you don't agree, okay. But this last bit is, to me, I felt like the question was, how can we critique the police? And I went pretty in depth on a couple of things. But I'm also going to be kind of overarching everything I've talked about in all these videos. So for this critiquing, I'm going to say certain things, then I'm going to kind of round it all out. But to me, there is two forms of policing, okay? You have crime fighting or enforcing the law, and you have public service or social policing, policing for the society, right? There's tension between them, but I'm going to explain each one, right? And the critiques in them. First, I'm going to talk about crime fighting. I'm going to talk about some personal examples. So what is crime fighting? What is it? It's not like superheroes. Sorry, police officers, you're not Batman or Spider-Man or whatever. That's not what you are. But you do stop crime. You prevent crime and you do stop it. Okay? So crime fighting, for instance, could be sort of a robbery. That's a huge example. A major example. There's a robbery that happens. Police is pulled on site, whether it's SWAT, whatever. They go into the site, they get a debrief what's going on, and then they take the course of action that is needed. Maybe it was 3 people that robbed a big bank. It's not really bank robberies. Those don't really happen anymore. You have, they get a successful heist, and now it's a chase. In that instance, there's going to be patrol cars everywhere, guns firing, whatever, right? You see in the movies, there's a bank robbery, and they're in a huge chase, and there's you got people at the bank like, whatever. And if that happens, then the police, of course, is going to take course of action. They're going to pull out their guns, and they're going to shoot back, you know what I mean? The likelihood of that happening is very, very slim. The likelihood of a big blockbuster robbery movie chase is very slim. So there's a form of crime fighting. Another form of crime fighting could be down to a simple ticket, down to someone was going 10 over in a 25. Instead of, you have the 5 mile an hour rule, instead of going 30, they went 35. That can be crime fighting. But the problem that I have with this sort of crime fighting and my critique on it is I feel like there is this big sort of, macho man, this sort of power trip or egotistical look to it. So, sorry, excuse me. There's this sort of egotistical power trip to it, and that sucks. You're a police officer, you enforce the law, you uphold the law, that's what your job is, but you don't let it get to you. You know what I mean? Just because you pull someone over for going 10 over in a 25 doesn't mean you get to be a douchebag to me and yell at me. Come up to me nice. Say, hey, I would rather have an officer come up to me and go, hey, sorry, buddy, you were going 10 over. I'm going to need to see your license and registration. If I was a patrol officer, I'm not going to be a patrol officer. That's not what I want to do. I want to do drug enforcement agency. But that's what I would like. I also don't need someone to come up to me and go, hey, I'm sorry, you are going way too fast. I'm so sorry that you're going. I don't need that. Shoot it to me straight. But I also don't need someone saying license and registration now. Do you know how fast you were going there? I don't need that either. Just come up to me normally. But I think a lot of the time there is this sort of not all officers, but some officers may get this sort of power trip or egoistical thought. I'm the officer. They obey me. I uphold the law. I enforce the law. You do, but there's no reason to be such a douchebag about it at all, And a huge thing when it comes to a sort of egotistical power trip usually can go into racism. I'm going to tell a personal story, okay? I was driving down the road, and I got pulled over. I went 10 over. Unfortunately, I normally only go 5 over, but unfortunately, I went 10 over without realizing that there was a sheriff radaring me. He pulls me over. He gets up to my window. He's super nice, okay? I have an African-American sister. My sister's adopted. He comes up to the window. I roll down my window. I forget to roll down the back window. He goes, hey there, buddy. Do you know if I should go? Oh, do you mind if you can roll down that back window for me, that back driver's side window? And I was like, of course. He's like, looks like there's someone back there. Rolls down the window. He has a smile on his face. As soon as he sees my sister, he went from 2 in a matter of seconds. And I think this is a huge sort of thing, and it is wrong to do. Yes? I'm taking my video right now for my class. Oh. You gotta wrap your mom's present before you go, please. Okay, I will after this. Sorry about that. So where was I? So his face automatically changed. And I was like, okay, that's a little strange. And he was rude to me. And I understand I was going 10 over. I deserve it. You know what I mean? Yes, I will pay my ticket. I understand that. But the fact that, and he was also like, I'm not the guy to go like, racism. That's not me. If someone's being racist, I'm going to point it out, but I'm not going to target someone for it. Like, I'm not going to attack saying, you're being like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to do that. But he was kind of attacking my sister. He was asking me like, who is she? What are you guys doing? Why are you like, I was like, officer, that's my sister. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, she's adopted. My family's white. My sister's African American. And he was very like, oh, are you sure? I'm sure. I was there when we brought her home. I was there. I was at my grandma's house. I was 5. Remember the memory very clearly. I was sitting on my grandma's couch watching the door all night because I was so excited that I was going to have a little sister. So excited. And he just was kind of not attacking her directly, but attacking her in the sense of questioning me. And I think that's a sort of barrier, like it was in my last video, but also sort of an egotistical sort of power trip. He automatically assumed that I was trouble or my sister was trouble due to her skin color. Now that is not okay at all. That is a huge power trip. That's just an example that I have. I know we were to do a real world example, but I thought this would hit a little bit more home for me because this is a personal example of mine. So hopefully this is okay. But I think that's wrong, that he automatically puffed up his chest and he got all tough, My sister was like 11 at this time. You know what I mean? She's a kid. If you want to be upset at me, get upset at me. I'm the older one. Like, if you're that much of, like, worried and concerned about that, bring it up to me. Leave my little sister out. She's 11. You know what I mean? So, it just felt like he was automatically trying to present himself in a manner that was threatening. And that's where that sort of egotistical power trip kind of comes in. Semi. Another form of it could be like just upholding the law. Like, I understand as a police officer, especially as like patrol and stuff like that, and other things like, for instance, DEA and the ATF and bomb squad or whatever, that they have to uphold things that are in their job, but don't make me feel so incredibly bad for me going 10 over in a 25. I understand I broke the law. I understand I shouldn't have been going 10 over in a 25. I understand I shouldn't have been going 35 miles an hour. But don't make me feel like such an idiot for it. I think that is a huge thing, is this constant power trip of you obey me. To an extent, I do. But you also serve the public. You serve me. You serve the citizens. You are the protectors of each sort of place. You know what I mean? There's also the military, which protect us. But so don't be so egotistical about it. If you have that much of a problem with me going 10 over in a 25, give me a ticket. It's gonna be like $100 ticket. Give me a ticket. Don't just make me feel like such a douchebag for it. So that's my big critique on sort of crime fighting role, is they get this sort of ego to them that, yeah, I'm supposed to protect, and then make people feel so bad for doing it. If I murdered someone, which I'm not gonna, that's different. That is a heinous crime. I deserve any sort of punishment that I am given, whether that is death or you call me, I don't know, you cuss me out. That's different. But a ticket, just give me the ticket. Don't be so mad at me. They get these egotistical power trips, and I feel like they don't think as well with their brain when that happens. So there's that. And then the other form of role, in my opinion, is sort of the public service role, or serving the community is another form of that. They're meant to protect us, from dangers. And they coincide, this crime fighting role and this public role. They coincide with one another, and they are similar but different. So public service, whether that's responding to a mental health call. My dad works for the fire department, so I hear about mental health calls all the time, because when you're a firefighter, you have to work on the A-car for a certain amount of years before you can just stick to the truck. Excuse me. So a lot of the times they'll have police and fire be there, right? And I feel like a lot of the time on those calls, from my research I've done, is they sort of, it's almost scary seeing a police officer, in a sense. Like, if I was having a midlife crisis or a mental breakdown, I saw the police, I would be a little bit worried, But if I saw a firefighter, I wouldn't be as worried, you know what I mean? But a lot of the times when they are in that sort of public service role, there's a lot more use of empathy in that, and wanting to feel for the person and what they're going through, wanting to make sure they're okay. For an instance, I don't remember all the names, but it was in Bellingham. But I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. That's why I'm bringing up this story. And he didn't really give me all the names because he wasn't allowed to. But he wants to be a patrol officer. He went on a ride along, and there was a mental health call. They get there. They said, hey, you can come in. You don't have to. He was like, I don't want to get in the way of things, so I'm just going to stay here. They do their thing. They come back, and this officer has almost like he's about to have a tear in his eye, because he connected with this person so much. He had empathy for him. He felt bad. He wanted to help. That is a good thing. Being able to connect with the public in that sense is millions. And I think that is one of the greatest sort of things someone can do. You know, sort of this, just being able to understand, being able to work with the person that's having this terrible thing happen to them, you know, that's what you should be doing, you know. And I know you can't necessarily relate that to like a murder or like a bank. Like, I understand, you know, it's more of an adrenaline rush when that happens because it's a way more major of a crime. But being understanding, you know, like with that, you know what I mean? Like, wanting to connect with your community, wanting to help is going to make millions, especially within those historical barriers I talked about in my last video. So understand that. You're going to have to go watch that one, because I'm not going to re-explain it because I'm focusing on these. But just being, you know, wanting to sort of feel for the person, you know, whether it's in a total, I feel for you, you know, I understand this person, or it's going to be okay. You know, we're going to help you. You know, that is going to shine a light on a person who's having such a bad moment and make them feel protected. You know, and make them feel more safe. You know, and I think officers get a bad rap with that a lot. You know, because, like, for instance, like, everyone loves firefighters. Who doesn't like a firefighter? They save lives. They're there to help people, you know. But so are police, you know. And I don't think people really realize, like, how much calls are mental health crises, or midlife crisis, or whatever, or abuse things. Like, I have seen countless of clips of, unfortunately, children who have been abused, you know. And all that officer wants to do is make sure that kid is okay, you know. And the kid finally feels good, and then they run up to them, and they give the officer a hug, you know. Like, if I was an officer and that happened, I would feel so good. I would feel like I did my job. You know what I mean? I made these people feel safe, you know. But they clash, these two roles, they clash. They mesh a lot, you know, and they have their differences. You know, I would say the more positive role would definitely be the more public service role than the crime fighting role, because, you know, with public service, you're obviously caring more, and with the crime fighting, you're trying to stop a crime. But you can incorporate your empathy with someone, right? I'm using an example. This has been used thousands of times, you know, like movies and whatever, you know. Let's say I'm married and me and my wife are about to have a baby, right? And her water breaks. I'm getting in my car and I am speeding to that hospital as fast as I can. You know what I mean? I get pulled over, right? These officers give me a ticket. My wife's in labor in the back, right next to me, about to have a baby, you know? But then the officer's gonna give me a ticket, you know? If I found that, I would automatically do police escort if I was able to, or I would let them off of the warrant and just be like, hey, I understand, slow down a little bit. Please, I don't want anyone else to get hurt, you know? Instead of either trying to be a crime fighter and giving me a ticket and upholding the law and serving justice to me because my wife's about to have a baby and I don't want my baby to die, you know? Like, there's no point in that. There's no point in you getting upset at me. Like, I understand I'm speeding, but there's a reason for it, you know? So incorporating a little bit more empathy into the crime fighting sort of situation, like understanding what is going on. Murder's off the table, you know? That don't have any empathy for that, in my opinion. You know, maybe if they're mentally ill, you can have a little bit of empathy, but they also killed someone, so but instances in like abusive or gun violence or whatever, you know, having more empathy in that, you know, being able to forgive, being able to understand, I think would really, really, really help. And that sort of egotistical crime fighting role is my biggest critique. That is the thing I think needs to be looked at the most. Because police can come off threatening, and they can be more threatening when their ego gets in the way. I see an officer, they can be over militarized, like in a squad car, they have a shotgun, they have weapons on them, they have body armor, you know. I don't know if this is totally true. I believe they have gas, like, protection in the backseat, They could be a little over militarized, you know what I mean? But there's also loops, they have a taser, they have pepper spray, they have not as lethal options for people, and I think that is good as well. Is having those other options that don't seem as threatening, but they can be a little over militarized, especially when in certain communities. So, in a whole, over all these 3 videos, these are my personal takes and things that I think could be fixed. From the media farming, my very passionate media farming speech, to the barriers and how I think we can overcome those, to my personal critiques. I believe any of those things on how I think we can fix them and what I think is wrong, but what I also think is right, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna be hard, and it's gonna really take time. But I know as a society we can do it. I know as people we are gonna be able to do it. And that is what is wonderful about. I'm sorry, I worked really late last night. I think that is something that is wonderful. Is we can fix it, but even if it takes time, we as a society can get it done. So again, across all these videos, these are all my opinion. I had a very fun time doing this project. I definitely should have spaced it out a little bit more, but I work a lot, and I work nights. I work from 3 to about 11 to 1 in the morning, so I sometimes don't have all the time. But doing this project, I really think was good, and especially this class. It really opened my mind to a lot of things. So it's the final project. Thank you for watching. Whether this is random people on the internet and you decide to watch all of my videos from why the media farming and how it shapes our view on police, to what are the barriers, how can we fix them, and to my final critiques and thoughts. So again, thank you. These are all my opinions, and I believe that if we really just put forth effort, we as a society can make a change and get what we need. So, thank you.